let us do the news. Going to start with something interesting. This is at the top of Citizen Free Press today. From the Financial Times. Interesting article from the sound of it. Inside the plan to kill the Ayatollah. This was published in the Financial Times 4 hours ago. An interesting story. Something that they've been working up to for some time. When the highly trained loyal bodyguards and drivers of senior Iranian officials came to work near Pasteur Street in Tehran, where Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed in an Israeli airstrike on Saturday, the Israelis were watching. Nearly all the traffic cameras in Tehran had been hacked for years. They had images encrypted and transmitted to servers in Tel Aviv and southern Israel, according to two people familiar with the matter. One camera had an angle that proved particularly useful, according to one of the people, allowing them to determine where the men liked to park their personal cars and providing a window into the workings of a mundane part of the closely guarded compound. Complex algorithms added details to dossiers on members of these security guards that included their addresses, their hours of duty, the routes they took to work, and most importantly, who they were usually assigned to protect and transport, building what intelligence officers call a pattern of life. They were spying on them through their own traffic cameras, chat. The capabilities were part of a years-long intelligence campaign that helped pave the way for the Ayatollah's assassination. This source of real-time data, one of hundreds of different streams of intelligence, was not the only way Israel and the American CIA were able to determine exactly what time the 86-year-old Khamenei would be in his offices that fateful Saturday morning and who would be joining him. Nor was the fact that Israel was also able to disrupt single components of roughly a dozen or so mobile phone towers near Pasteur Street, making the phones seem as if they were busy when called and stopping Khamenei's protection detail from receiving possible warnings. That is possible. That is a thing. Mobile phone towers can be jammed. Certain phone lines can be jammed. And even certain conversations can be intercepted. Long before the bombs fell, one current Israeli intelligence official said, "We knew Tehran like we know Jerusalem." And when you know a place as well as you know the street you grew up on, you notice a single thing that's out of place. The dense intelligence picture of the arch-enemy's capital was the result of laborious data collection made possible by Israel's sophisticated Signals Intelligence Unit 8200, the human assets recruited by its foreign intelligence agency Mossad, and the mountains of data digested by military intelligence into daily briefs. Israel used a mathematical method known as social network analysis to parse billions of data points to unearth unlikely centers of decision-making gravity and identify fresh targets to surveil and kill. All of this fed an assembly line with a single product: targets. Itai Shapira, Brigadier General in the Israeli Military Reserves, a 25-year veteran of its intelligence directorate, said, "In Israeli intelligence culture, targeting intelligence is the most essential tactical issue. It is designed to enable a strategy. If the decision-maker decides that someone has to be assassinated, in Israel the culture is, we will provide the targeting intelligence." They don't really spend too much time debating the models and ethics of it all. If you're targeted, you're targeted. That's it for you. Oh, I saw the hydrate and stretch redeem. Supreme, thank you. Israel has assassinated hundreds of people overseas, including militant leaders, nuclear scientists, chemical engineers, many innocent bystanders. But even with a killing as prominent a political and religious leader as Khamenei, how much this aggressive decades-long use of its technological and technical prowess has paved the way for major strategic gains is fiercely debated both within and outside Israel. The country's intelligence superiority was on full display in the 12-day war last June, when more than a dozen Iranian nuclear scientists and high-ranking military officials were assassinated within minutes in an opening salvo. That had been accompanied by an unprecedented disabling of Iran's aerial defenses through a combination of cyber attacks, low-range drones, precise munitions fired from outside Iran's borders, destroying the radars of the Russian-built missile launchers. One intelligence official said, "We took their eyes first." I mean, when you're going after an enemy, that's one of the first things you have to do. Take out their eyes. Disable their radar. That way, they can't see where you're coming from. Makes it harder for them to fight back. Both in the June war and now, Israeli pilots have used a specific kind of missile called the Spedo, variants of which are able to hit a target as small as a dining table from more than 1,000 kilometers away, far from Iran and the reach of any of its aerial defense systems. That is incredible. Accuracy down to a piece of furniture in a house from more than 1,000 clicks away. Honestly, I think I prefer that to pointless moralizing, only to do it anyways after a great theatrical showing of the moral high ground and virtuous signalling, regardless of votes of support actually backing it. Yeah, people tend to have more respect for people who don't talk about things, they just do it, and then they tell people about it after the fact. That has a more powerful impact. That, I think, is more faithfully adhering to the doctrine of you can just do things. Not all of the details of the latest operation are known, and some may never be made public. That's true. A lot is probably going to remain secret forever, in order to protect sources and methods still being used to track down other targets. But killing Khamenei was a political decision, not simply a technological achievement, according to more than half a dozen current and former Israeli intelligence officials interviewed for the story. When the CIA in Israel determined that Khamenei would be holding a meeting on Saturday morning at his offices near Pasteur Street, the chance to kill him out alongside so much of Iran's senior leadership was especially opportune. They assessed that hunting them down after a war had properly begun would have been much harder, since the Iranians would quickly embark on evasive practices, including heading underground to bunkers immune to Israeli bombs. Khamenei, unlike his ally Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, did not live in hiding. Nasrallah had spent years of his life in underground bunkers, dodging several Israeli assassination attempts until September 2024, when Israeli fighter jets dropped as many as 80 bombs over his hideout in Beirut, killing him. 80 bombs. Even in a hardened underground shelter, you hit something, the same target, hard enough and often enough, you're going to break through. Instead, Khamenei had mused in public about the possibility of being killed, dismissing his own life as inconsequential to the fate of the Islamic Republic. In fact, some Iran experts said he expected to be martyred. He had a death wish, and the Israelis were happy to accommodate him. But during wartime, one of the people interviewed said he did take some precautions. It was unusual for him to not be in his bunker. He had 2 bunkers, and if he had been, Israel would not have been able to reach him with the bombs that they have. It almost seems like it was an assumption that he would be in a bunker and rarely going out. Most people would think that sort of thing. It oftentimes can surprise people just how easy it is to do something or get something done. Some things are harder than we think, and then some things are easier than we think. There are times I've taken action in my life. Nothing like this, of course, but, just accomplishments that I've had in life, and I honestly thought they would be harder than they actually were. I often found myself remarking, I didn't think it would be that easy. So does that imply that the plan wouldn't have worked without the US, so much for Israel being in control? I don't know, sure. It would seem, from what I'm seeing in the news, Israel had planned to go forward with this with or without the United States. It was then that the US agreed to participate in a joint operation as a sort of attitude of, if we're going to do this damn silly thing, don't do it in such a damn silly way. Even in June of 2025, in the throes of full-blown war, Israel made no known attempts to bomb Khomeini. It had instead targeted mostly the leadership of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, missile launchers and stockpiles, and Iran's nuclear facilities and scientists. While Donald Trump had repeatedly threatened to attack Iran in recent weeks, building up an armada off its shores, negotiations between the US and Iran over the Islamic Republic's nuclear program were meant to continue this week. The mediator in Oman said Iran was willing to make concessions that might help stave off a war and described the most recent meeting last Thursday as fruitful. Apparently not. Though previously I believe the Iranians have used negotiations as a stall tactic of sorts. In public, the US president grumbled that things were moving too slowly. But a person familiar with the matter said in private Trump was dissatisfied with Iranian responses, paving the way for war. A person briefed on the operation said the attack on Iran had been planned for months. But officials adjusted that operation after the US and Israeli intelligence confirmed that Khomeini and his senior officials would be meeting in his compound in Tehran Saturday morning. Tracking individual targets used to be laborious work, requiring visual confirmations and passing false confirmations, but Israel's vast algorithm-driven data collection had automated that task in recent years. They were using AI chat, and the AI has gotten good. But for a target as high value as Khomeini, failure was not an option. Israeli military doctrine requires that two separate senior officers, working independently from each other, confirm with high certainty that a target is in the location that is to be attacked and who he is accompanied by. Sort of a fail-safe measure. In this instance, according to two people familiar with the matter, Israeli intelligence had information from signals intelligence, such as the hacked traffic cameras and deeply penetrated mobile phone networks. One of the people said it showed that the meeting with Khomeini was on schedule, with senior officials heading to the location. But the Americans had something even more concrete, a human source. Both people familiar with the situation said. The CIA declined to comment. Well, of course they would. Jess, welcome in. Thank you for the redeem. I know North Korea did use negotiation through the 90s and early 2000s in the lead up to their first confirmed nuclear detonation. They did. Yeah, for a lot of these tin pot little communist and Islamist and African, South American countries, negotiations like this, coming to the negotiation table, they're stall tactics. That's really all they are. It's a way to buy time so that you can keep doing the usual shenanigans. To delay U.S. economic action by seeming willing to negotiate in favor of potential political moderation and investment in North Korean nuclear energy. Yes. I'm curious as to what the reaction has been inside the Presidium in Pyongyang. What Kim Jong-un must be thinking right now. Because slowly but surely the dominoes are toppling. Venezuela, now Iran, soon to be Cuba. Kim is finding himself in a very isolated position. This is also putting the squeeze on the Chinese. And we hear rumblings that within hours of learning Iran had been attacked and Khomeini had been killed, what a surprise, the Russians want to talk. You can see the change in Pentagon's strategizing by declassified documents on handling North Korea before and after the bomb test. Yes, I imagine they were quite surprised by all of that. What was the main goal in doing all of this? Regime change. Regime change and probably the seizing of oil assets. More than likely, most of the infrastructure is going to remain in place. It's been said that Venezuela was a blueprint where the head was cut off of the state, but the body was left intact. And so the next person is going to take over. I would imagine, and of course I could be completely wrong by this, we'll have to see over the next few weeks or perhaps even the next few months. Someone in government that is a bit more reasonable and easier to do business with will take over in the interim. At least perhaps until Reza Pahlavi can be installed as the new Shah, possibly transitioning Iran back to a monarchy. Pahlavi has said that what he has described and what he wants for the people sounds very much along the lines of a constitutional monarchy or a democratic monarchy of sorts, with the Shah being the head of state, but being much like the British royal family, more of a figurehead than anything. The real power resting in the hands of the people and the parliamentary ministers that they elect to represent them. That would be my guess, my projection of what we can expect in the future. At least those are the designs. Now make no mistake, Reza Pahlavi has a tremendous amount of backing, not only from the Americans but also from the Israelis. If he is installed and the monarchy is restored, he is going to be an American and Israeli puppet. Make no mistake. I say that as neither a good nor bad thing, simply is. Penguin Pilgrim, welcome in. I know they're currently negotiating with the Chinese Minister of Economy, from what the Global Times have mentioned, and is once again open to nuclear talks with Trump. I know this is going to happen, but is this part in Civ when we just conquer the planet? A lot of dominoes appear to be falling. We can say that. And it certainly seems like the sort of approach that an American type of empire should have exercised long ago, rather than the incredibly stupid approach taken by the neocons some 20 years ago. Again, it's one of those things where those who crave war are absolute fools. But it's also one of these things where, once again, if you're going to do this damn silly thing, don't do it in such a damn silly way. We could finally become a space-faring species. Yes, if we can learn to stop feeling this need to babysit the third world, we might actually get back into space and exploring the cosmos, as we should have so long ago. We only stopped, especially the Americans stopped, because the economy went south and there was too much internal social strife that drew attention away. But also leadership change at NASA. You had great men like Werner von Braun, who's, despite his questionable past, was quite loyal to his newfound government and his newfound homeland, the United States, and was just a man who wanted to build rockets and get man to the moon and beyond. And the new leadership that took over NASA had such an absolute unreasoning hatred of von Braun because of his obvious connections to the Third Reich that they were just obsessed with destroying him and running him out of the agency. And they got their way. But in the process of running good men like von Braun out of NASA, they effectively killed the Apollo space program. And the Americans never went back to the moon after some time in the early to mid 1970s. All because of unreasoning hatred and an unwillingness to let go of past grudges. To put aside those sorts of things to work towards a greater good, towards something bigger than themselves. We lost that. We lost that as a society, and we've paid the price ever since. Now it seems like we have good men, like Elon Musk, who, whatever his motivations, seems quite intent on getting men back into space and putting men back on the moon and going on to Mars and beyond. So we may yet still get back. It shouldn't have taken us 50 years to do that. Appreciate the lurkies, Whacker. Miku, welcome in. Good to see you. How are you? Let's see. Where was I in the article? Oh, yes. Okay, so we've established the Israelis were spying on Khomeini and the top leadership, his inner circle, for quite some time, using traffic cameras, mobile phone antennas, and the like. But the Americans had something even more concrete, a human source. The CIA declined to comment about this. The CIA had one of their men embedded somewhere in Khomeini's Presidium. Sorry I'm late, was very busy earlier. That's alright, Stoner, welcome in. You can always catch the VOD later and get caught up. But good to see you. Good, glad to be here. Oh, I'm glad you're here. I think it's the first time you popped into one of my streams. I appreciate you stopping by. That allowed Israeli jets, which had been flying for hours in order to arrive on time at the right location, to fire off as many as 30 precision munitions. That's according to a former senior Israeli intelligence official. The Israeli military added that striking in daylight provided an advantage. The decision to strike in the morning rather than at night allowed Israel to achieve tactical surprise for the second time, despite heavy Iranian preparedness. Apparently, the Iranians were expecting a surprise attack in the middle of the night, which, most people would think if you're going to pull a surprise attack, that would be the good time to do it under the cover of darkness. Instead, the Israelis surprised everyone and did it in the middle of broad daylight. The tactical success was the culmination of two separate events more than 20 years apart, according to Seema Shine, a former official at Mossad who had a focus on Iran. The first was a directive given in 2001 from former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon to Meir Dagan, the then head of Mossad, preoccupied with Syria, Palestinian militants, Hezbollah in Lebanon and others, to make Iran a priority. Sharon told Dagan, according to Shine, all the things the Mossad is doing is well and fine, But he said, what I need is Iran. That is your target. And since then, that is the target, she said. Israel had sabotaged Iran's nuclear program, killed its scientists, fought back its proxies, even destroyed the military infrastructure of its crucial ally Syria in the days after dictator Bashar al-Assad was ousted. I think, to my knowledge, Assad is still living in exile in Russia. I'm also told he's a gamer. He occasionally plays online. No idea what his handle is online, though. Would be interesting to be in some sort of PvP match or a Fortnite match, and all of a sudden you're going up against the former Syrian premier. That would be rather interesting, I think. I heard we lost an F-15, but the pilot was recovered and she's safe now. Don't know if it was a he or she, but yes, I did see that footage. The pilot did eject. Early reports were saying something about it possibly being a case of friendly fire. But yes, the pilot was able to eject in time, and they are safe. Iranian intelligence agencies were formidable adversaries. In 2022, a group tied to Iranian security services released data purportedly siphoned from a phone belonging to the Mossad chief's wife. Iran also hacked CCTV cameras in Jerusalem during the 2025 war to get real-time damage assessments that the Israelis had censored from broadcast. It bought photographs of missile defenses, even mapped the jogging route of a major politician by bribing Israeli citizens, according to Israeli prosecutors. I wonder if they actually saw some prosecutions from that. I imagine so. I would hope so. Well, yes, if you can do it to them, turnabout is fair play. Good chance they'll do it to you. The second event Shine added was the October 7th, 2023 cross-border attack from Hamas, which Israel claims was backed by Iran and changed a long-standing calculus in Israel that despite having penetrated the circles of several enemy heads of state, from Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser to Syria's Hafez al-Assad, their killings were off-limits even at times of war. Interesting that they would exercise restraint at that point. Very interesting. Killing foreign leaders is not just taboo, but operationally fraught. Makes sense. Failure only adds to their stature, as it did following the CIA's many botched attempts to kill Cuba's Fidel Castro, while success can set into motion unpredictable chaos. But, said Shine, Israel's string of intelligence coups, including the 2024 assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, and a $300 million multi-year clandestine project to booby-trap thousands of Hezbollah pages and radios, has its own seductive powers. See, that one has always... I've always found that one curious. Hezbollah... I can understand the radios. Even in this high-tech era that we live in, sometimes the most effective equipment is the simplest, such as an old analog radio or walkie-talkies of some kind. But pocket pages, really? What on earth were they using pocket pages still for? And why? Just that part has always sort of raised an eyebrow with me. I've never understood that, why they continue to use pocket pages. Read Tom Clancy, see what the Ryan Doctrine says about bombing national leaders. Unfortunately, I don't think I've ever read any Tom Clancy novels. My dad was a big Tom Clancy fan for a long time. He read most of the Jack Ryan series of novels, but eventually he stopped. He said he didn't like the writing style of Clancy. He said he always had this tendency to get off in the weeds, devote entire chapters to just being autistic over technical specs of things. before he would finally, at long last, get back to the main storyline and keep that moving along. Did you hear about John Bolton throwing a fit after the special military operation in Iran started? He spent 3 decades begging for a regime change in Iran, but apparently Trump's methods aren't what he wanted. Yeah, Bolton probably wanted indiscriminate bombing of anything and everyone. I mean, that isn't a thing or a country on the planet John Bolton wouldn't like to drop bombs on. And he probably wants to do the incredibly gay and retarded old-style neocon regime change methods, which don't work, as we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan. Again, it was one of these things of, if you're going to do this damn silly thing, don't do it in such a damn silly way. John Bolton wanted to keep doing things in a damn silly way. And finally, it took some sort of leadership to say, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do something different. The HLC video on this whole situation is incredible. Post that in stream suggestions, sure, if you're in the Discord server, please. Communication outside of the digital telephone networks. Okay, I suppose that's an interesting point, yeah. Reminds me of Soviets using typewriters to avoid computers. Sometimes there's still something to be said about the old analog methods, you know? And maybe that's the thing with the pocket pages. It's still an analog network of sorts. Because they couldn't communicate via video game chats anymore, as those were being tracked since it was discovered ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and al-Nusra used multiplayer game chats for messaging. I think I remember a story about that long ago, yeah. So like old Norse sagas, which start, then go into lengthy detail to explain a minor thing like a person's background, only to return to the story, then do the same thing 3 times again. Yeah, something like that. That seems to be, from what I understand, that was always Clancy's writing style. Where things that are in no way obviously related to events and doesn't give an answer unless you go over the saga story 3 more times. Last book written by Tom Clancy was The Bear and the Dragon. Everything following was ghost written in his name. Yes, there's been... the Tom Clancy name has been carried forward long after he passed away. And I'm sure it's keeping his family very rich and well fed. But that said, it's not exactly Clancy's work. I'm not even sure things like, for example, Splinter Cell. I don't think that was an entirely original Clancy work. It was something he just sort of put his name to. But that was other writers and creative types working on that. Wish I could stay, but it's past midnight. So night-night, everyone. Have a great stream. All right, Madhu. Thank you for stopping by. That was the way history, legends, and myth was recounted in Danish writing tradition up until the early Renaissance, when we began adopting from the German, French, and Italian literary traditions. Interesting. Let's see. Oh, last paragraph. Shine said, in Hebrew we say, with the food comes the appetite. In other words, the more you have, the more you want. Greed is a very real thing. A strong temptation. But that's from the Financial Times. You know, that's more about how Israel hacked the security cameras and phones to track Khomeini. Let's see. Iran's key naval base on the Strait of Hormuz set ablaze from strikes. The attack overnight on the port has left one of Iran's prized sea bases and at least one frigate on fire, with black smoke filling the air. These are the latest satellite photographs that we have of what's going on. This is something that I talked about. There are other reports coming out that Iran has completely lost any sort of naval supremacy around the Gulf of Oman or the Strait of Hormuz. There was a report, Iran saying they had closed the Strait of Hormuz, yet also roughly around the same time as shortly afterward, it had been reported that all of their naval vessels had been wiped out by the American Navy. So it's kind of hard to close the Strait of Hormuz if you don't have any ships to close it with. So I'm thinking that the Strait of Hormuz is back open again, thanks to the efforts of the United States. Because there was this thing in... Let me go over to a few things I had posted about on this earlier today. By the way, up on the YouTube channel and also on Rumble, we have yesterday's in-depth analysis of the fall of the Iranian regime. It is nearly 3 hours long, so strap in and lock in if you're wanting a good long video to binge or listen to. It's great if you're just an audio-only bro. That's available over on the YouTube page, Lord Rexworth VT, or you can go to the Rumble page and watch that. Early access was available for Rumble subscribers, so it pays to give me a follow over on Rumble. You will get the content earlier than anyone subscribed to the YouTube channel. Something to keep in mind. Yes, this from John Conrad. He's quote tweeting a thing from G Captain. Major marine insurers just cancelled war risk coverage for the Strait of Hormuz. 150 plus ships stranded, rates tripled, one seafarer dead. This is only day 3 of the Iran conflict. Sounds very alarmist. And there's all of this from John Conrad. Potentially the biggest Iran story nobody's talking about. The global insurance market may be heading toward a systemic crisis. Here's why. Most people don't realize London is not just the financial center, it is the center of global insurance. It's the home of Lloyd's, quite possibly the biggest insurance company in the world. They underwrite roughly 40% of the world's marine cargo. Ship sinks, a port gets bombed, a canal gets blocked, the bill lands on a desk somewhere in London. This is why the UK continues to punch above its weight, for now. Not the Royal Navy, not diplomacy. It's insurance. You control insurance, you control trade. And London doesn't just control 90% of global trade that moves by sea. Lloyd's and the London market are major insurers of almost everything. Skyscrapers, factories, ports, satellites, entire supply chains. You can't participate in public markets or raise large amounts of capital without insurance. Now, the normal playbook for war risk is repricing, not cancellation. Cancelling coverage entirely is a massive escalation in underwriting posture. It signals something beyond risk. It signals uncertainty so deep the underwriter can't even price it. The question everyone should be asking is why? Why not just jack up premiums, make a fortune off the crisis, like they did in the Black Sea off Ukraine? But to answer that, you have to understand why London has maintained a stranglehold on global insurance while losing nearly every submarket related to ships. And the answer is better intelligence. It's no coincidence MI6 headquarters sits directly across the Thames from IMO HQ, the world's maritime regulator, and short distance from Lloyd's itself. Now, the author of this post here has no proof of any direct pipeline, but it has long been speculated in the industry that intelligence flows from MI6 to Lloyd's. Having the best intel in the world would be the single greatest competitive advantage any insurer could possess, the ability to price risk that competitors can only guess at. But here's the problem. The majority of MI6's intel doesn't come from its own agents. It comes from Five Eyes, the alliance comprising the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. In other words, the US, the UK, and Commonwealth countries. Within Five Eyes, the dominant partner is obvious. That's the Americans, the CIA, the NSA, the NRO. Those generate the lion's share of intel. So, if Lloyd's pricing advantage flows from MI6, and MI6's best intelligence flows from the US, what happens when that data pipeline gets throttled? All indications are that Keir Starmer was blindsided by the size and scope of the US and Israeli strikes on Iran this weekend. And that alone tells you something about the current state of transatlantic intelligence sharing. It has been reported, and we don't have any sort of direct confirmation of this, that because of everything that has been going on as of late in the UK, a lot of that transatlantic intelligence sharing has been reduced. The Americans aren't briefing the British as much as they used to, or not in as great a detail. Some have even speculated they're not briefing them at all. We know there's been serious anger in Washington over the UK's decision to sell Diego Garcia, home to America's most strategically important base in the Indian Ocean, to the nation of Mauritius. It's not a huge leap to conclude the submarine cables linking Langley to London have gone dark, but at minimum have been significantly throttled. Starmer has been hell-bent on selling Diego Garcia. The Americans don't want him to do that. And so, this may possibly be a punishment to disincentivize that sale. Not giving away too many spoilers, but in The Bear and the Dragon, the Russian Federation joins NATO at President Jack Ryan's insistence. Foreshadowing, perhaps? Oh yeah, I can't give my phone number for this, sorry. I don't know what you mean, sure. I don't know what that means. Go Navy. Yes. Huzzah to the Navy. What this means for UK national security is a question for the Brits, but what it means for every company globally that's insured through the London market has massive implications for the entire financial system, because most large insurers worldwide don't do their own independent intelligence work. They just don't have the infrastructure for it. They just index off of Lloyd's rates. If you're insuring a skyscraper in Tokyo, a semiconductor fab in Taiwan, or a port in Argentina, you get a Lloyd's quote, and then you shop that price round. Other insurers see Lloyd's number, they'll assume the diligence was done, and they price accordingly. But if the diligence was not done, that can be dangerous. This means if London is suddenly flying blind, it's not just Lloyd's policyholders at risk, it's the whole global reinsurance chain. The cancellation of war risk coverage on ships is not the crisis itself, it's the canary in the coal mine. If this hypothesis is correct, we could be looking at a systemic repricing event across global insurance markets, the kind of cascading uncertainty that defined 2008 and COVID. A lot of people forget that is what triggered the 2008 financial crisis, or one of the big triggers, was the collapse of big companies like AIG and the unwillingness to insure mortgages that people no longer had any confidence in. So the advice from the poster here, watch Lloyd's, watch reinsurance spreads, watch Five Eyes. That's where this story and possibly Wall Street breaks. All of these are valid points and concerns. But what it hinges on is, I think, whether the Strait of Hormuz remains open or closed. Iran has claimed it's closed the strait, but what with? They don't possess any naval supremacy in the area anymore. The entire fleet has reportedly been wiped out by the Americans. Iran has also reportedly lost all of their air superiority to the Americans and the Israelis. Now, you may recall on yesterday's stream, if you were watching, and if not, go watch the VOD, there was news of air traffic being grounded indefinitely in Dubai, with airlines cancelling and redirecting flights. All air travel in and out of Dubai stopped. But just today, we're getting rumblings that at least some of those airlines have reversed course on that, and they are going to start resuming flights beginning tomorrow, the 3rd of March. So, with that in mind, if airlines feel it's safe to resume flights once more, who's to say that the insurers are not going to reverse course on what they're doing to wartime coverage of maritime vessels just as quickly? And the big point that I really want people to remember is that you must keep perspective as you keep an eye on the news. Don't fall for the sensationalist headlines of the media or the emotionally charged panic tweets of some content creators out there, some of which may be written by artificial intelligence to maximize the emotional impact and retain your attention. That's also important to keep in mind. Don't let your emotions blind you to your good sense or the facts on the ground. As that famous poster from the First World War most famously said, keep calm and carry on. Let patience and time be your most important allies. And remember, the situation is very fluid at the moment. Things are changing, sometimes rapidly, sometimes faster than any of us can keep up. But it is important that you keep your peace. Maintain your self-control. This will not only make navigating the crises of life easier, it could very well someday save your life and the lives of others. And I quoted the 24th proverb in the 10th verse. If thou faint in the day of adversity, thy strength is small. That from the King James Version. The Message translation puts it this way: if you fall to pieces in a crisis, there wasn't much to you in the first place. It is easy to panic over headlines and breaking news. I know because I lived it and worked it in my radio days. Eventually, you learn to take a step back, to breathe, and let time be your ally. Let the story breathe. Let the dust settle. Give it some time so that things naturally flesh out of their own accord. Discord wants my phone number to talk in your server for some reason. Yes, I think you'll need to verify your account with a phone number, a link to said account, in order to access the Discord, where we've got settings set to maximum, just especially in light of everything that's happened with other servers out there. I felt it best to just take the maximum precautions. So, and that's just going to have to be in place going forward for the foreseeable future. Another problem was wealth management packets being sold by companies but called various things, which essentially took a variety of brackets, low and high value and property tax payment consistency, mixed them with the low ones that were typically avoided due to their low value, and this generally drove down market prices until a limit was reached. Now, something like that. I seem to remember that. Now companies delayed the actual collapse, which would have happened on 2007, so it didn't happen until 2008, so they could make their necessary liquidation preparations. Yes, there were signs of trouble going all the way back to 2006, even. Not that I don't trust you, I don't trust Discord with information. Can't send the HLC for now, then. That's all right, sure, it is what it is. I've got to keep myself safe, and I've also got to keep the community safe. Guess we've come full circle with viewing the UK as an enemy again. I wouldn't be too sure. Perhaps the Starmer regime? Yes. But the UK as a nation and as a people? No. Not so much. I wouldn't go that far. This is more the failing of... I would place the failing at the hands of Keir Starmer and his premiership. Two-tier Keir's got to go. We know that. He's deeply unpopular in the UK. Little wonder that people like Rupert Lowe are on the rise. At first we thought it was going to be reform. That's just turned out to be more of the same. Another case of the uniparty meet the new boss, same as the old boss. If anyone needs to be the next Prime Minister of Britain to try and turn the ship around, it has to be Rupert Lowe. He's a man who can be trusted. And he's a man that the Americans and everyone else can do business with. There was a documentary on their success. Yes, I imagine it's probably came from GB News. Nigel Farage hosts a television show on GB News, so stands to reason they would probably be practically embedded with Reform, doing some sort of documentary. Unless you're talking about Restore Britain, in which case it's probably someone else. This also gave them time to buy shorts in their own companies, banks, and the housing market. Someone made the calculations a few years earlier and was the first to make shorts in the housing market. Yeah, that was, I think, the events covered in the movie The Big Short, and also the book The Big Short, went into detail on that. But even the movie did not necessarily tell the whole story. Now, let's see. Do we have anything else? I think we had some other things. Oh, this particular tweet was going viral. Saw a guy saying, "This woman should never be allowed in a church. Personally, I think she should be welcomed. What do you think? Would she be welcome in your church?" I've heard similar stories. Even going back to a time when it was considered verboten for women to wear makeup in the church. And a woman who wanted to go to church and give her life over to Christ was turned away at the door. She had on a Sunday best and everything. They turned her away because she was wearing makeup. This was a long time ago. And it just broke her, apparently. Even drove her to madness. Ended up in some sort of sanitarium or institution. And it took a minister of the gospel, a man of the cloth, visiting her in that sanitarium, to finally drive the demons that were causing the mania out of her. And she woke up again for the first time in many, many years, and finally gave her life over to Christ. So much of that could have been avoided had they not turned her away from the front doors of a church somewhere, because she was wearing makeup, of all things. She just wanted to look her best for something she felt was important. Gotta go to bed. Good night. Alright, Stoner, take care. But to this I say, this is exactly the sort of person who needs to be in a church. How many times have we seen someone like this? Piercings everywhere in some of the awfulest places. Nose ring. The whole thing about nose ring detected, opinion rejected. Partially shaven head. Hair dyed all sorts of insane colors. Tattoos everywhere. Looking incredibly gender fluid. As though some sort of demonic madness and mania has gripped them. That is exactly the sort of person who needs to be in a church. Really, we all need to go to church. We all need Jesus. This woman in particular looks like she desperately needs Jesus in her life. We don't know her story. All we have is a photo to go off of. I don't know her from Adam. Her story could be completely different from what we could ever imagine in our mind's eye. But the vibes, if we're just going off of vibes here, I am getting the vibes of a modern-day Samaritan woman at the well. Which, those of you who don't know the story of that, do a quick Google search here. Yes. John chapter 4. The Gospel of St. John. Let me go with the New King James. Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee, but he needed to go through Samaria. So he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. A Samaritan woman came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? But Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said unto her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered and said unto her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband, and come here." The woman answered and said, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You have well said, I have no husband, for you had 5 husbands, and the one whom you have now is not your husband, in that you spoke truly." Suspected adultery here. The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain. You Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place whereon one ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is for the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that the Messiah is coming, one who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." He is admitting to the Samaritan woman, "I am the Messiah." And many of the Samaritans of that city who believed in him, because of the word of the woman who testified, "He told me all that I ever did." So when the Samaritans had come to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his own word. Then they said to the woman, "Now we believe, not because of what you said, but we ourselves have heard him, and we know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world." This, chat, is the modern-day Samaritan woman at the well. And if she earnestly seeks the living water, she shall have it. And if she can be saved, then there is hope and salvation for anyone, even you and me. I think that's probably the best place to leave it for the rest of this. Oh, there is one more thing that I tweeted out. Which, if you're not following me over on X, please do so. x.com/Lord Rexworth. Or just search Lord Rexworth, all one word, on Twitter. Fools crave war. Cowards and controlled opposition criticize and condemn reflexively. The wise, on the other hand, take a step back, observe, and wait patiently. They don't just blindly trust the plan, but they are willing to see how everything plays out. And then they make a judgment call. That is what I am striving to do. Sometimes the hardest thing we can do is maintain the discipline to wait and see. Sometimes even harder is to do nothing at all, especially when everyone is so swept up in an emotional moral panic of some kind, claiming that somebody must do something. No, we don't have to do anything. Sometimes you just take the Gabe Newell approach and you win by doing nothing. Because you don't have to do anything. Your enemies, your rivals, all of your problems, oftentimes they'll just sort themselves out. Well, there's one thing I've noticed, and that is that too many people out there, especially in the world of content creation and social media, as of late, are trying to chase clout by trying to predict the future. They want to be the one out there that claims, I predicted this, I predicted this. They want to be the first to get their thoughts out there. Falling for the old breaking news fallacy. So many people have gotten egg on their faces by doing that. Because in their rush to judgment, their rush to get things out there, they make too many mistakes. They don't wait for the dust to settle. And when it does, they find out they were wrong about a great many things. I try to be humble enough to tell you that I have no idea what the future holds. Everything that's going on right now could go entirely according to plan. It could prove disastrous. Could even be something down the middle. But we simply don't know. Anyone who claims to know, they're lying to you. Don't trust them. The world could look like a very different place a few days, even a month from now. And what I do know is this: war is a very ugly, unpredictable, and ridiculous thing. But it is sometimes necessary. We should pray that it goes well for America and for the rest of the world. Recent history has shown it is unwise to bet against America. We should also pray it ends swiftly, because it's true the people are still weary from the last war, and there's even less of a stomach now for some sort of protracted conflict. But as I said, if they're going to do this damn silly thing, don't do it in such a damn silly way. Beautiful message today. Thank you, Pionli. Thank you. I think I like it far better when we find out things happen when it's like, whoa, really? Instead of being on the bleeding edge of things. That being said, when things happen, and say Foxu is the first one to cover it, that's different because you all have the discipline to not make sweeping calls on things. I try. I'm sure Kirsche tries as well. It takes a certain measure of humility to just say, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I really don't know. We can make some speculations. We can try to make predictions of where things are going, but understand, she and I are just anime people on the internet. You should take everything we say with a grain of salt. And do your own homework. And reach your own conclusions. Don't just blindly accept anything that I or Kirsche tell you. I would hope that we have both earned your trust somehow. But again, don't blindly follow us and parrot what we say. Do your own research. Keep yourself informed. It really is easier than ever, even on a time crunch, to find out fairly quickly what's happening in the world. And it's also possible, I believe, to do that whilst keeping yourself on a fairly low information diet. But sometimes that can be helpful too, so as not to overload yourself with too much information. It'll certainly stop you from doom scrolling, which that's no good for anyone.